Well, hello, welcome to another Acts Church podcast. Thanks for listening. My name is Hunter Croft. I am on staff here at Acts Church, and we have a good podcast for you here today. We're going to be talking about careers and things like that, but you might notice a little bit of difference in ambiance today. Can you feel it?
Yeah.
Because it's Friday afternoon, and we're outside, actually. We moved the studio outside to record this podcast because it's a nice day and not
it was
too
cold
windy.
inside.
Yeah, it was also very cold inside.
Because we don't always run the heater because we think about your tithes and we try to maximize the ministry use of those. So sometimes we don't turn on the heat in some rooms.
And you can't turn it on once you start recording because then it sounds like bzzz.
Then it's loud the whole time, right?
Yeah,
That doesn't work at all. So
here we are.
yeah, so we're going to be talking about career, vocation, which is a different way of talking about calling. What is our calling in life, and how do we know, and how do we apply the mind of Christ towards our careers and towards the things that we're called to? And there's a lot to think about with that. Before we kind of get into that, there's a few things that I want to catch you up on. We're at our 2-year anniversary for Acts Church. We've been around now for 2 years, which is exciting. It's been an interesting 2 years, lots of victory and lots of difficulty and lots of challenges, and it's been an adventure. And so for those of you who are listening and who are actually attenders of Acts Church and have been here for the last 2 years, I want to thank you for being part of this body, which has just been an amazing thing to be. And so, Hunter, you've been here for, what has it been, 9 months or so?
It's closer to 10 or 11. Actually, it's past 11. My year will be, I think, Father's Day of this year. So, or maybe a week after Father's Day. So yeah, I've been here 11 months now.
And your wife had an interesting day.
Yeah.
Tell us about what happened this week.
Yeah, she got her wisdom teeth out yesterday morning, and she found out that hurts, and also that she doesn't do well with anesthesia. So we had an interesting day yesterday.
And I've never been under anesthesia
at
all. I mean, I've slept lots of times, but I think I would wake up if they started yanking bones out of my jaw. So.
Yeah.
That you have not either, so there's really nothing for us to talk about because neither one of us have experienced it.
No experience. I can tell you that it makes some people very sick afterwards, though.
Yeah, you got that part of it.
Yeah.
My wife had to go under. She had her pinky got very jacked up. And
that's right. I was right about when I got here.
A big paper clip looking thing into her. Yeah, it was around the time you got here. Big paper clip looking thing into her pinky, and metal sticking out of it and whatever. And when she came out of there, she was not herself.
Yeah.
But she wasn't sick, I don't think, or not particularly sick.
See, Taylor was totally herself. Like she just seemed like herself when she's sick. Basically, is what she seemed like. She wasn't saying anything.
So she's
weird.
just high all the time.
Yeah, I guess that one or the other. She's either
you've
really good at
that
taking this,
out, right?
or
I'm kidding. I'm
Just
kidding
kidding.
for those of you who are offended by that.
she actually only has taken
she's
ibuprofen. So she's doing.
Well, she's pretty tough then, because when I
pretty
got my wisdom teeth out, it was a pretty horrific experience. I went. I lived in California at the time, and we had.
Well, there's your problem.
Yeah, our health insurance was not top of the line, and we went to a dentist who. Basically, he had like multiple rooms, and what he would do is he would, line up people up in the rooms, and he'd just knock it out, just one thing after another. He's just billing, right? He's just billing the insurance. And he came in, and I mean, he's taking these teeth out of my face, and it's just, I did not go under. He gave me some Novocaine, no got no nothing.
Oh man,
and he's like having a break, my tooth in a half, and like. You got to imagine this guy's. I'm seeing this guy basically leaned over me. I think he may have had his knee up on my chest or whatever. And he's yanking his blood spurting out of my mouth onto this guy, and it was horrible. And it's like you can't talk or anything. It's just he's just wrenching on these teeth to get him out of my face, and so it wasn't a great experience.
Man,
it was the last time I've been to the dentist, and it was about 16 years ago. So,
yeah.
But luckily I have fantastic teeth, and so. Hopefully I don't have too many cavities. But that was not a great experience. I hope that hers was better. Just the fact that she was asleep for it would make it a lot better.
Yeah.
So,
I was amazed by how
good.
fast it was. I had brought all of my office stuff to the dentist or to the oral surgeon so that I could be working while she was back there. And I was expecting, an hour and a half, 2 hours later to get called back there, but I got all my stuff set up, started working for about 15 minutes, and then they said, Hunter, your wife's ready. And I was like, oh,
Huh.
all right.
I guess it doesn't take that long.
Yeah,
It wasn't a particularly
apparently.
long process. It was just horrific.
Felt long.
Yeah, it was horrific.
Yeah.
And I was destroyed in some small way through that experience. So anyway, we're going to talk today about career. And so I can talk a lot about my own experiences, but I want to talk in general about, let's lay it out sort of like this. Obviously, we have a call from the time of the garden, from pre-fall, before humans fell, to work. Adam and Eve, they were to work the garden, right? They were to be involved in the work that God had put there for them. The difference was that it wasn't toilsome. Mm-hmm. Right, it was work, but there was satisfaction in it. It wasn't something that was, even though I'm not saying it wasn't hard work or physically, demanding and so on. It may have been, but there was a joy in it. It would have been like everything else, perfect.
Which I think sometimes we still experience today, where things just, it's hard work, but everything's lining up and it's joyful and not painful.
That's only because I'm your boss.
Yeah,
that you're experiencing
that.
No, absolutely. Work is not all toil. There's blessing and joy in work. I believe that even post fall, there's all kinds of blessings and satisfactions and whatever in work, from the smallest things, the satisfaction of doing the smallest things to the largest things, whatever they are. And so that's there. But our call is to work, unquestionably. Mm-hmm. Whatever we are capable of, we're called to work. And so, and when we don't, for those of you who have ever been out of work looking for a job, what that feels like. It doesn't feel good. Mm. And work can take a lot of forms. I mean, we've had times, when our kids were young, for several years, Tiffany was at home with the kids, and I can tell you that was a lot harder work than anything I was doing. And work is what the Lord has called you to do, and so that's where the issue of vocation comes in. What is your calling? What are you called to do? And so, today I want to kind of walk through what does it look like to find God's calling in your life. Maybe we can tell some stories about how that's been with us personally, and then how do we have the mind of Christ towards work. So let's start with that sort of vocation side. I remember I was in law school, and the dean of the law school we were at his house. Several of us guys were over there, and he was asking us kind of what is it that you are looking for, by fulfilling your vocation. What are you looking for? And I remember just saying, look, at the end of the day, what I'm after is to hear those words that Christ will say, well done, good and faithful servant. And that whatever my calling is, I just want to accomplish that, because I desire, I thirst for the Lord to be pleased with me, and to think that I've done, I know I'm just an unprofitable servant. I can tell you that. You've been around me in a work environment, so I'm an unprofitable servant. But to follow the call that God has for you is an amazing thing. And so talk to me about, you're a millennial. And so millennials have a very different way of looking at work.
I am a millennial.
You are. Yeah. So we watched this, and some of you may have heard, depending on when you're listening to this, it was this week, this guy, his parents had to evict him from their house. He's 30 years old. They had to evict him from their home. And it was crazy. They asked him to move, asked him to leave, giving him notices, like legal notices. You need to leave, because this guy wouldn't get a job and leave their house. So we watched an interview with the guy. And if he's listening, shout out to long-haired guy who lived in his parents' house. Hope you found a house by now. But the interviewer was, talking about him being a millennial and maybe having a millennial type view towards things. And he was just arguing back and forth until he finally just said at the end of the interview in a very awkward way, I am a millennial. Yeah.
Because he was trying to refute the fact that he was a millennial,
Right.
because he was not
Because,
liberal.
right? Because he thought that millennial referred to politically liberal, which has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
It has to do with when you were born. Yes. And so finally, he admitted, "I am a millennial," and everyone's like,
And that was
"Yeah,
the
you
end
are."
of it. That was the end of the interview.
Yeah, that was it. That was the end. She was just like,
was a lot of
Will was
cringe.
kind of flabbergasted by the whole thing. It was just such an awkward interview. It's cringeworthy. If you get a chance to watch, I think it was a CNN interview.
Which, of course, is what CNN is aiming for. They're trying to make it as awkward as
Oh,
possible.
and it was,
too.
and they succeeded. It was hard to watch. It was hard to watch. But and now this guy has some vocation issues. But millennials do have a different view on work, and in some ways a better one, in some ways a worse one. A better one in the sense that they actually do think about vocation, I think, and calling, and not just. I go to get a piece of paper so that I can get a certain job, so that I can make a certain amount of money, so that I can, blah, 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 which is sort of that, American system. They're more like, no, I want to do something that's fulfilling. I want to do something that's satisfying. I want to do something that I feel called to do.
Right.
The unfortunate thing is, for some, or at least the I don't know, the cliche out there about millennials is they're unwilling to do the stuff that they have to do.
Right, right.
They want the good part of work,
Yes.
not the toil part of work, I
Right.
guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And so while all of us want to do things that are satisfying, sometimes you just got to get your hind end off the couch and get to work,
Do
whether it's something
something.
that you love
Yeah.
or that makes you feel important or special or not.
Right, yeah.
And that's true for every generation. That's not a millennial specific thing. Everybody's got to learn to work. But let's put that aside for a second and talk about your path into career. Mm-hmm. So you're in high school. Let's set the stage. This was like 5 years ago when you were in high school.
I was not in high school. Oh, I was in high school 5 years ago.
Well, there you go.
Dang it.
5 years ago, you're about to graduate from high school, probably, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're about to graduate from high school.
I think I was in Hawaii about 5 years ago.
Oh, that's
on
nice.
my graduation trip.
That'd be even nicer than being here,
know.
but this isn't bad either.
This is pretty good.
So you're forget about the Hawaii thing. You're about to graduate from high school. You're thinking about what you're going to do next. Tell me what was kind of, you're a believer. You had been in church your whole life.
Uh-huh.
And you already were signed up to go to Boise Bible College at that point.
Yeah. Yep. I was pretty early getting in there.
Okay. So what's your mindset? What are you thinking? What's in your mind about what the future is going to look like?
I think I had a pretty good picture just based on looking at other. At the time, I wanted to be a youth minister because when you're a youth student, being a youth minister sounds really cool. And it is. I was planning on being a youth minister, so I just basically was looking at youth ministers that I admired and said, I want to be in your shoes in 5 years, basically, is what I was doing at that time. I trusted God that that was a good path for me, and that those people seemed to have things pretty well figured out. So I wanted to do the same thing. I was close. I wasn't too far off, but
Yeah, you work with youth a lot still.
yeah, I still do that. And I did a lot in college, but yeah, I just figured that college was my first tangible step towards that vocation.
And what was what was your vision or your thought about what it was going to all look like when you okay, I do this for 4 years and then I get hired at a mega church in California, or what were you thinking?
I didn't want to work at a mega church. I didn't really have anything against working at a mega church, but
Well, you succeeded.
yeah. Well, I don't know. We're pretty mega in other ways other than
We're
size.
mega cool.
I didn't really have any particular picture in mind. I don't think I was called to rural ministry, which actually was a pretty big. There's a lot of encouragement at my college to get into rural ministry, and I was like, I don't think.
So that's
me.
like a thing that people would aim towards. Like, I want to work in a rural area as opposed to a metropolitan area.
Yeah, I don't know if some individuals clearly felt called to go work in a rural community, either because they grew up there or had visited rural communities.
It's tough to say.
Rural is the worst word.
Rural.
I'm just going to call you small. No, I'm not going to do that either.
Small communities.
Small communities. Small distant communities. People definitely felt some calling to do that. And I think that there's a lot of need in those rural communities because, I think people want to go. it's much more desirable to go work somewhere
In a city.
In a city, yeah.
Where
For
you can
most
find,
people,
for you got to have Subway close by.
yeah, I don't know how. What do I eat if I don't have Subway close by?
right.
And so I think it was a kind of a push of the school. I think that our school had a lot of ties to rural communities and saw those communities at risk of losing ministers as the generation that was ministering to those communities was going into retirement. I think there was a little bit of a push to get students involved in that. And that was something I just never felt called to. I don't think it would have been a good fit for me or for my wife.
So how did you know what you were called to, though? You used the word, I didn't feel called to. I want to, there's sort of a Christianese about that word. And so for our listeners who maybe didn't grow up in church or don't know what we mean when we talk about call or vocation, what is that? How did you know that you weren't called to that and you were called to something else?
I would describe the way that I felt. Okay, we'll talk about that particular calling. I would say that I felt called not to rural ministry and instead to more of a metropolitan area, partly because of my own characteristics that were intrinsic to me, not something that God put in me, right? That was part of it. Part of it was experience and where I thought my experiences were leading me to be particularly strong suited.
Okay.
I don't think I have hobbies or experiences or skills that would make me particularly suited to fit into a rural community. What
would those be?
Farmy type things.
Farmy
type things. That's a technical term.
For those of you who are good at farming
agriculture,
type things.
okay.
Agricultural. Okay. Right.
Which is kind of ironic because my parents both
Animal husbandry, perhaps?
No. My parents actually grew up in an agricultural community, in several different agricultural communities, and they moved to Spokane, about the time I was born, a little after I was born. And so, it seems like I spent a lot of time in rural communities, but usually just for holidays when I go to see my grandparents.
That's where your family lived.
Yeah, right. Both my grandparents live in a town of 2,000 people. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think 2,000 people.
I can't correct you. I don't know what town it is.
I was actually just talking to the people in general.
Oh, okay.
Someone out there tell me if Dayton, Washington is larger than 2,000 people, but that's my guess of how large Dayton, Washington is. They lived on opposite ends of town. They both lived kind of.
Your grandma and grandpa lived on opposite ends of town?
My grandma Croft, okay. my dad's mom.
Okay.
And when my grandpa was alive, they lived on one side of the town.
Okay, I was going to say that's a very strained marriage.
No. My mom's parents lived on the other side of town.
Okay.
From my dad's parents, like totally.
So they were like star-crossed lovers.
Yeah.
Opposite sides of the tracks.
Except you could walk between their houses in probably 25, 30 minutes.
Okay.
So, real small town, 2-minute drive. They went to the same church, but they lived on opposite sides of town. So I got a lot of experience, I guess, through that, but it never felt like something that I was like, yes, these are my people. This is my community. This is my culture that I fit into.
You just didn't feel an affinity towards it.
Right.
So as we're working through, and just so that, because I want to give some practical help to people, one of the things you were looking at is, how has God built me? Mm-hmm. What are things that seem to fit with who I am as a person? Like,
right.
What are my skills? What have I seen that I'm good at? What are other people telling me that I'm good at? What am I comfortable with? What feels consistent with sort of the person that God made me?
Right.
Okay, keep going.
And I think you can be misled in that. And
I was. I tried to play in the NBA for years. And, no, I didn't. I knew better than that.
That'd be a sight. I want to just see each NBA team get a middle-aged white guy on the team just for comparison, just to be like, because sometimes you're watching the NBA and you're like, oh man, you suck, and it's like, no, he doesn't suck. He's one of the best in the world.
Right.
Let's get
just
some comparison
some dude
here.
like me out there trying to play, so you can see how slow and short and all those kinds of things that the person would be. That would be interesting, just to give a little perspective. Like, okay,
yeah.
Or it should be like, you have leagues where, like a co-ed league, where you got to have at least one guy and at least one girl out on the field at all times or whatever. It's like you got to have at least one of these middle-aged guys out on the court with you on each team at a time, well, and they can't guard each other.
Yeah.
They just both stand in the middle. They just stand in the middle of the court and don't move. But that would be interesting for comparison.
Yeah. How did we get there?
I don't know, but that's not my calling.
That wasn't your calling. That's right. And so, I kind of, as there was some pressure from my college to look into rural ministry, I just kind of felt, no, I don't think that's quite my calling. I think I probably could have done it, but I didn't think it was necessarily a path to pursue unless God clearly. And that's another way that I would determine my calling is a path that God is setting before me. Coincidences, and I don't want to get into a debate over whether or not coincidences exist. And when things just line up for
you all can start a debate in the comments
about
whether coincidences exist. Go ahead.
Controversy.
Things line up, right?
Yeah, when things are lining up in front of you, if things were just lining up for me to go into some rural community, then, I'd probably take that as God's calling.
You would have had to learn how to pronounce rural.
No, it would just be community.
You just find the name of the town and say it. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So that would be how I think I, at least in that one facet of my life, was how I probably determined that calling.
So you're going through college, and you're learning stuff, and
occasionally,
from time to time. And it was Idaho after all, so I don't know. No, I'm kidding. Love people in Idaho. Shout out to our Idaho listeners. So you're learning and you're going through this, and I don't know what you do a couple of internships out in this area, right?
Yeah, actually, both of them. One of them was literally less than a mile from where we're sitting right now, I bet. The other one over in Hillsboro, on the Oregon side, did a couple of internships.
What were they? What did you do in these internships?
My first internship was a full-time internship, so I did a lot more in that internship. I preached 3 times during the summer. I helped with youth a lot. I did a lot of media stuff for them. Not so much video. They didn't quite have uses for video at that time, but I did lots of print graphics. They did a 4th of July event at the park, and so I made a lot of print materials for that and helped them with that. I was just basically there to serve however I could. There was a big push not to let me get stuck in one ministry. They didn't want me just doing youth. They didn't want me just doing worship. Oh, that's another thing I did is I helped lead worship.
Sounds like it was a big push to get you to do as much as they could get from you.
Yes.
As opposed to keeping you from one ministry.
That's certainly part of it. No, it was actually from my college. My college's instruction was don't let yourself get sucked into one particular ministry.
Right.
Because sometimes, you go to a church and they just have a really big gap somewhere that you can fill. And you end up just doing that full time.
They wanted you to get as much experience as possible, which sort of leads into this, you figuring out what you're good at, what you like, what seems to be. So what did you find from that summer that you did like? What did you find that you didn't like?
I'd have to go back and read. And that was also an internship that I was required to journal pretty heavily, keep a journal of events and things that happened.
Would you say that helped you in determining your calling?
Yeah, it certainly was designed to do that, and I think it definitely did help with that. It was a good way to reflect on all those things, to see what things I did worked and what things I didn't work, and whether that was something that I could improve on, or whether it was, kind of an indicator of a calling, or more often where I'm not called to. I don't remember any specifics from that summer, because it really was just a good summer all around, so I don't have any particular negative memories. I do remember I was in charge of one beach trip for the youth kids, and I remember there were a lot of things about planning a trip that I found out I was not thinking about. It mostly had to do with how we're gonna. I was like, we'll just do hot dogs at the beach on a fire, and we got there, and I think I had hot dogs and buns, and they said, "Do you have any condiments?" And I went, no. And then they said, okay, well, let's get the fire started. Do you have firewood? And I said, no, I figured we'd find some here. And then they said, okay, well, do you have a lot? We got the firewood now. now do you have a lighter? And I said,
Oh my god! You just figured that you'd go like Man versus Wild.
it was the
or
Oregon
what?
coast. I think probably every
The
other
fires were
person
just going
had
to
it.
start randomly, or
No,
what?
no. Everybody on the beach would have their own lighter. So I think that actually
For
is
what? I guess with all the pot smoking in Oregon, I got you.
Yeah, that was it. I think that actually probably is how we ended up finding the lighter.
Some dude with the munchies, and you
I
found
knew what
him.
I was doing.
Yeah, so you find the guy with Doritos, and you're like, I know you got a lighter, bro. Yeah, I got you. No offense, guy with Doritos on the beach.
Yeah. But I was really good at planning out games for that event. I was really good at.
So you were good at the classic youth stuff, but you got your first taste that logistics are more complicated than you thought.
Yes. Yeah. Which I don't know if that was necessarily a calling thing as much as a know your weaknesses thing.
Which is an experience thing.
Yeah, right. So I had a good time with that internship. And then my next internship was at a church up the road from us that is also meeting in a public school. And I helped with worship again, pretty similar. They didn't have a youth group at the time. I don't know if they do now. They had me do some print stuff, lots of just kind of being there for meetings and contributing with ideas. And that was a part-time internship, so I did less. And then I preached, I think, 4 times that summer.
Oh, wow.
And then I got a lot of flack from my advisor back at the college for this internship. I got a bad grade on this internship because I was getting married that summer. Mm-hmm. And so it was I was planning on doing an internship that next fall. During school, but then I realized how many classes I was having to take. So I was like, I got to do an internship this summer. But our wedding was July 26th, which is less than a month out from school starting back up. So it was towards the end of my summer, but still kind of in the middle. And I think I was able to do 8 weeks of internship, but they're supposed to be a 10-week internship. So I didn't get a good grade from that.
Well, you were interning as a newly married person too.
No, I wasn't married yet.
Oh,
it was
in July you got married.
I got married in July, and then my internship was over after my wedding.
Gotcha.
My last week of my internship was July 19th.
I'm sure you were able to fully concentrate on your internship when you're about to get married.
In fact, I think I was supposed to come back like the Monday after that last Sunday, and I was like, sorry, I got too much going on. I can't be there. It was a good internship, and left it at that.
Thanks. We'll see you.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. Kind of felt bad about how it ended just because, but I also didn't because I was getting married. So yeah, I didn't get a good grade on that internship. Didn't get as much out of that internship because I was, getting married in a couple months.
So you got married, you head back to school for your last year?
Yep.
And you're realizing, okay, when this is over, I actually have to have a job.
Yep.
A real job.
First time having basically the world open to me. If I want to go do something in Argentina, I can do that. If I can convince my wife to, which I could not.
She didn't want to go to Argentina?
I didn't ask, but I would doubt it.
I don't know. We took her to Honduras. She did okay.
I was blown away by that. So I
wasn't
proud of her for
She loved it.
Yeah.
She had a great time. Well, other than getting sick, but
yeah.
She gets sick all the time.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Let's be fair.
She would have been confused if she didn't get sick.
Shout out to Taylor and
if she didn't get sick while she was there, we would have moved there by now.
right, no doubt.
This place is
it's
magical.
The one place I don't get sick. Yeah. She wasn't that sick.
Yeah.
She was fine.
So yeah, I had one other internship credit, which was that I had to preach 12 sermons, and I had to manuscript each of those out, and I had to do a reflection on each of those, and I had to film 3 of them and do a reflection of watching those films. And
what was that like, watching yourself preach?
Not good.
You didn't enjoy that?
I did not enjoy that because it wasn't like anything. When I watch something, I want to be surprised, and I was not surprised by anything.
That's true. Like, I've seen this one before.
Wait a second. Does he say? Oh, I knew he was going to say.
I wonder
that
if it's like that for like actors who make a movie. They not only have they done it once, but oftentimes you're filming those scenes
like, can Chris
17, 20, 30 times.
Yeah. Can Chris Pratt enjoy watching the Avengers? I doubt it.
I mean, the only thing that they might enjoy is, of course, when they're filming the movie, all the special effects aren't there, and the CGI and all that. And so they get to see what it looks like, which would be cool, but they know the lines,
but
right?
But also, as someone who makes movies almost as good as the Avengers,
yes, you do make movies almost as good as the Avengers.
But you in your mind, when you see those clips that look great and when they're edited down on purpose for a video, you see all the other stuff that's going on, and it just doesn't look as magical to you because
Right.
you see everything behind it. And so I'd like to be able to erase my memories of making videos so that I could see them with fresh eyes and maybe, glean more about how I can make it better. But
So you're watching yourself preach, and what are you thinking about preaching at this point? Because you're a preaching major.
right. And around sermon 3, I was like, man, this is not my thing. Because I had a bunch of roommates who are also preaching majors, or at least in preaching classes. And they all seem to really enjoy it and do pretty good at it. And I seem to really not enjoy it and really not do good at it. And I think I grew, and I was terrible at first, and I got tolerable by the end of it, I would say.
But was
Most
it something
improved.
that you started to come to enjoy, or just something that you learned to do better at?
I learned to do better. I don't know if I ever enjoyed preaching. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the study, and I enjoyed writing. I liked writing a lot. But I would much have rather written essays than have been writing sermons.
So in this time period, and just for those who are sort of, okay, this isn't, of course, my exact path, this is Hunter's path, but the things that they can glean from this, you're the media side, which you had started in high school, probably sort of messing
Yeah, a
with
little bit.
media stuff, but you didn't go to school for that.
Nope, never officially trained.
But as you were going through, you were realizing that you had a gift on that side. When you first came into school, had you thought that would be a major part of,
I think
or even the worship side? Talk about both, because now you're the worship and media lead at Acts Church, and that's what you do, as opposed to a youth pastor or a preacher or some of the things that maybe you thought you might be. So how did you
Right.
grow into realizing these would be the things that were going to be more prominent?
when I was I just realized, man, I'm making a lot of videos for people. The most significant impact I'm having on this youth group is making a lot of print and media materials for them to use to advertise events and to remember events, filming them and stuff like that. And so around my freshman year of college, it became pretty apparent. And you're thinking of you're wanting to eventually land a position with a church, so you're kind of thinking about, how can I market myself? How you're trying to get in a potential employer's head.
Sure.
And so you're thinking, well, I'm a preaching major who is really good at, I always assumed that some sort of music or some sort of media would be involved in wherever I ended up. I would have been really disappointed if I ended up in a church where I was not able to do any video or graphic design or music at all. It would have been a bummer for me. And so
Okay.
that was probably a good sign that it was something that I should seek out.
So at some point, you're towards the end of school, and who told you about the position here? Did you find it yourself?
I found it on like a Christian job search site.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it was. I don't remember exactly how you advertised, but it would have said worship and media.
Right.
And so, were those the positions
In
you were
fact,
looking for, or?
The position was, I think it was pretty much worship leader, and then like in the posting it kind of hinted at, we'd also like it if you were good at media stuff. And of course at the time I was not, I think I had like fleeting thoughts of, what if I became a worship leader? But not really, it never really developed beyond that, even after graduation, even after I had graduated
Right.
college. I almost could have gotten a minor in worship ministry from my college. I think I would have needed to do like a couple more classes and an internship, and I could have had a minor in worship ministry. So it was, it was like kind of something that was around, but not. And in fact, I passed up. I had seen your posting, and I went, but they want to worship. This isn't it wasn't a media guy with some worship tendencies. It was a worship leader with some media tendencies.
Some worship tendencies.
Yeah. With that,
He tends to worship from time to time.
yeah, occasionally likes to sing.
Right.
No, I passed it up thinking, no, this isn't my thing. Because I had never sung into a microphone. Didn't feel like I was particularly gifted that way. Didn't think that it would be. I thought it would be a potential possibility, but I didn't feel comfortable applying for a job like that immediately.
So what changed your mind about that?
I don't know. I think it was probably an hour between when I passed it up and when I actually applied. I think it was just kind of you know what, I should try this. I think you were somewhat nondescript on what you meant by worship leader. If you meant someone who would organize, because I think I would have been, at that time I was comfortable with the idea of planning worship sets and organizing a worship team and arranging the music and everything like that. I was comfortable with that idea. Just not the worship leading part, not being the guy that people are looking at on stage,
Right.
to lead worship. And so I think I just kind of went, well, maybe this would work out. I'm just going to apply for it. What's the worst that could happen? We were kind of
what
in
happened, I guess.
Yeah. I know.
That's
Apparently
the worst
it worked.
thing that could have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how many positions did you apply for, and what were the other kinds that you applied for? The other descriptions of jobs that you applied for, like youth leader jobs. And
I
stuff
did
like
apply
that?
for one youth leader job at a church near here, Journey Christian Church, I think.
Yeah, that was downtown Camas.
Yeah. I applied there. Never heard back from them. So, thanks. Just kidding. It all worked out. And I applied with a Calvary Chapel up near Seattle.
Okay.
And I think I applied a few other places. I talked to a guy near Tacoma who I already knew him, and he was looking for a guy who could take on the pulpit, take on preaching after he retired. And I said, I don't think I'm your guy. Sorry. So I talked a lot. I don't remember if I applied to any more of those. Your church, the Journey Church, and the Calvary Chapel.
It's not my church, but
I know, but
it's our church.
Yeah,
Right.
correct. Acts Church,
Yeah,
Journey
Acts
Church, and Southeast Calvary Chapel, or I can't remember what it was called. A Calvary Chapel up there. And I talked to the guy from Calvary Chapel, and the position at Calvary Chapel was, what was it? Creative director, I think? No. Director of Creative Arts, I think is what it was called. And I talked to him for a while, and he said, yeah, we've got some applicants. And it sounded like they were, probably 3 months out from an actual hire. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, okay, I've got my name in that realm. And then I applied for this church, and pretty quickly heard back from you guys. Sherry Ware called me and talked to me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. She's my gatekeeper.
She warned me about you, and
yeah, I'm sure she did.
Actually, I don't remember how exactly that conversation went. I remember she just kind of gave a brief explanation of what Acts Church was, like where you were from, and
so did I call you, or did you come meet me for the first time?
I met you for the first time right where we're sitting right now, actually. Right. We were friends on Facebook, and
exactly where we're sitting right now.
I think you were sitting in that chair. Well, it wasn't that chair, because that chair used to be inside.
Though.
Yeah. And it was
That's
a little bit colder than it is right now, and a little bit rainier than it is right now.
Was it rainy?
It was a really rainy weekend.
And I was smoking a cigar, and you were thinking to yourself, what?
I honestly thought that you were doing that as, I thought you were doing it for shock factor, like, oh, let's see if this kid is like gonna get thrown off by this.
Oh, that's so funny that you would. I'm just not that smart to have thought about how to shock you.
Well, yeah, I know better now.
Yeah.
And it was kind of
and
weird.
So were you shocked? I mean, what was your thought about that?
It was different. Yeah. You weren't the first pastor that I had seen smoke a cigar, but it wasn't a normal thing for me either. I wasn't expecting it, I guess. In general, it was kind of an odd.
And I probably should have been wearing a shirt, to be fair. It was kind of weird too. No, I was wearing a shirt.
I was just
Probably wearing
had
a jacket if it was raining, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably some puffy jacket.
I probably shouldn't have been in the full bathrobe while we were having the conversation. No, so you came down here and you interviewed. Go ahead.
It was a weird day. So like I got on the road from Boise. It was a Wednesday, I think. No,
I don't remember.
It was a Thursday, I think. Got on the road from Boise. I canceled I was supposed to be on a worship team that weekend in Boise. Canceled that. Told them I couldn't play. Drove over here. Like the phone call with Sherry was on Wednesday. She was like, "Can you come tomorrow?" And I was like, "No." And then I thought about it. I was like, "Okay, I'll come." And drove over here with my guitar stuff. And I only brought my guitar stuff because I thought it was a worship leader position, and I didn't think about the media at all. But then you ended up having me do more media stuff while I was here anyway. So I came here, but on my way, as I'm like leaving Idaho to go into Oregon, all of a sudden my phone just dies. It was at full battery, just randomly dies. So I pulled over in like Ontario and tried to find a Verizon store to get my phone to work, and they finally got to work. But it was just a weird morning in general because I was driving without any contact with the world, which would have been totally normal 20 years ago, but was very weird for me. Mm-hmm. And then got here.
Because you couldn't drive 20 years ago being 3 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
They were against that back then.
Yeah.
And I'm driving, I drive down the road. I'm looking for a church. And actually, I think I got told that it was a house. But, I'm looking for a house. And you really don't even see the house until you're past it. So I passed the house, had to drive back, pulled up. Was looking for any signs that said Acts Church, and then I realized there was one on the door. I came in, knocked on the door. Susan opened the door for me. She's like, "Oh, he's in the back." So I walk through the house. I come back here, and it's just a backyard, and you're back here sitting with your computer, smoking a cigar, and just not what I was expecting. It was just a weird day in general.
Yeah, you were a little off put.
I don't know if I was off put, but I was disoriented a little bit, I would say.
I'm not sure that those are different things. But, yeah. So you're disoriented.
Disorientation can be off-putting.
So we have the interview. You find out that it's not purely just a worship thing, that there's a lot of media involved with it, which I'm assuming was
good news for me.
Good news. Yeah, that you were happy about that.
Yeah.
And so we had a conversation, and then you're having to, I don't remember at what point you got offered the job, but it wouldn't have been that much after that.
I think it was Monday or Tuesday after that.
Okay, so you get offered the position. Or did I have you come back for another interview?
No,
I can't remember.
So I was here for a full weekend. I was here Thursday through Sunday. I played on the worship team Sunday. Okay. And then you were like, "I'll get back to you," and you got back to me. I think it was Tuesday.
Okay. So now you're in a situation or did you just accept right away, or did you? I don't remember.
No, I think you said like pray about it for a couple of hours and then get back to me. And I was like, okay.
That sounds like me. Not a couple of days. You get a couple hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if you're ready to do this, let's do this.
Well, you were in a hurry, and I was also in a hurry because we were.
You had to be like move out.
Yeah, our apartment was going to raise our rent by like $200, and we were going to have to sign a year contract if we didn't move out by July 10th or something like that. And this was in late June. So, so I was like,
so what was the, let's get back to the calling part of this. So you have a major life decision to make at this point that has to do with your calling, your vocation, your career. And so you went in, to back up, you went in out of high school thinking youth pastor. You became a preaching major in college. That's what you sort of chose to go after, recognizing that wasn't necessarily your thing, but realizing that the gifts in media and worship are more your thing.
Right.
Although still youth, you still like that.
And I liked media because it was a background role. It was a don't be up on stage type of role. And so it was almost like in contrast with the worship. Well, although I liked playing guitar in a worship band because I was able to just kind of stand off to the side and play some music and not be the center of attention. And so that's why the idea of being the worship leader was still a little bit of an outside my reach type of idea.
Right. Well, and of course, part of being a good worship leader is to create an environment where Jesus is the center of attention, which it's good that you're not a person who's desiring spotlight because that helps you to push the church towards really focusing on the one that we should be focusing on, which is actually a really good thing. Probably a separate podcast talking more about worship, but let's let's work through what's happening in your heart, what's happening in your mind with you and the Lord as you're thinking about, okay, I've seen the church now. I've met some of the leadership. I've gone through this process. How do you know at this point this is what God's called you to do?
I don't know. I just prayed about it. I talked to my dad a lot about it, just because before I make any large purchases or any big decisions, I think I usually call my dad just to talk about all the pros and the cons and the.
And that's good advice. I mean, I think that having counselors that to be, and your dad, of course, is a spiritual leader, in both in his church as an elder and in your family. And so going to someone who has shown good spiritual leadership, who's going to give good advice is a good idea. So you go to him, and so he tells you, get away from this guy who's smoking cigars and whatever.
Yeah. I think I called him after every single, I came here, met with you for like an hour and a half, left, and I called him. And then I went to band rehearsal that night at your house, had an hour and a half band rehearsal. Oh, and then we talked for like another hour after that with just the band. And I left and I called him again. And then I was calling him after every encounter with you guys.
And what was he telling you? I mean, how was he helping you work through it?
I think he was just giving me questions to ask, like, is this, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And then I'd tell him something and he would say, well, that could mean this, or it could mean this. And, I don't have any specifics of what I was talking about, but, he would just kind of help me work through the ideas verbally, basically.
So as opposed to just saying, you should do this or you shouldn't do this, he was helping you to sort of analyze and work through, was this your call?
Right, yeah. He was kind of someone that I could just tell him what I was seeing, and he could almost repeat it back to me, but he could interpret it back to me and see if I was actually thinking through things clearly. And so that was all good. And so at the end of all of this, I just had to realize, okay, I don't know if I saw anything that was like, clearly this is the only option for you to go into ministry is here. I don't know if there was no spotlight shining on this office building or anything like that to tell me that God wanted me here. But there was lots of indicators that were saying this could be a useful position for you. This could be a group of people that you would both benefit from and be a benefit to. And so ultimately, because and also it was weird, all of our options to stay in Boise were disappearing. We were going to try and house sit for someone who was going to be gone for the whole summer, and that didn't work out. We were going to stay with friends that I lived with before I got married, because they were super hospitable people, super compassionate people, loved to be there for young college students and married couples, and just something was, I think they had someone living with them for that time that they just didn't have any space for us, and just so and then the apartment was. We were like, okay, well, we'll just like renew with the apartment for like 3 months or something like that. Because we knew we didn't want to be stuck in Boise for another year. We knew that we thought we were going to be leaving Boise before a year was up. 3 months sounded like a good time frame to us, but the rent was going to be like $2,000, which in Boise is it was a joke. They were just basically telling us, we're not going to sign a 3-month contract with you.
Right.
And so all of our options to stay in Boise were disappearing. The doors to Acts Church were opening much faster than I thought was possible, and there were no red flags along the way. And so that's probably how
you should have been more observant.
I know. I'm not terribly observant. That's what I was worried that like I'm gonna miss, like, oh, you missed the fact that these people weren't actually praying to Jesus, they were praying to Satan.
Right, like these people are totally, it's a cult, and you've just gotten yourself involved. And,
yeah, because you guys didn't have like a denomination that I could like look to and be like, oh, that's what they're like. I had to actually observe it all. So,
well, and I think that what you're bringing up is a good point as we're thinking about vocation. We're thinking about what it means to find your way. And we're not going to have time in this podcast for me to go through kind of my experiences and so on in this, because I spent so much time walking through yours. And maybe we'll do that in another podcast and talk about this again. I'm sure we will, because vocation is such an important part of our lives as human beings and who God made us. But, when we see, sometimes the Lord gives us a pretty clear calling. Like, you may have other folks, guys and girls over at Boise Bible College who had a much more, maybe a clear word from the Lord, where they are a dream and God was like, go to this, that kind of stuff can happen. But oftentimes it's being with the Lord, it's that praying that you were doing on your drive here and on your drive back and on the times between, while you're interviewing. It's all
the praying that I did while I was in college,
that's right,
that this wouldn't all be fruitless.
Right. The praying that you were doing during college, Lord, show me what you have for me and help me to learn the things I need to learn. Help me to, and watching and then just being self aware about like who you are and who God's made you, and like figuring these things out about yourself. What am I going to be good at is going to be a huge part of what you're called to. And of course, we're talking specifically in the context of ministry, or let's just say vocational ministry, where this is what we do full time. Everyone is in vocational ministry in the sense that if you're a believer and you're following Christ, a decent amount of your time should be in volunteering and in counseling with people and in being the kind of mentor and counselor that your dad was to you. To hopefully, he's probably that to other people too, and you will be as well. And all of those things are important. But you're working through this process, and you look for the open doors. The open doors, you look for red flags. Are there things here that am I the one pushing doors open, or is God the one opening doors? Mm-hmm. Is this something where, okay, I didn't even know for sure I wanted to apply for this. Here it is. And now as I walk through it, everything's saying yes about this, and everything about my own kind of thoughts and plans has been saying, no, staying in Boise is not going to work. This isn't going to work. That's not going to work. This church didn't call me back. This one's going to be 3 months later. And you start to see, okay, this seems to be where everything's going. That plus counsel, plus prayer is, I think, most of the time how we're going to sort of discover that next step that the Lord wants us to take. Mm-hmm. And there are, a billion different stories from a billion different believers about where God's called them and so on. But there's often people who are in a situation where they're thinking to themselves, I'm not sure I am where God's called me to be. I sort of pushed the doors open where I am, or went with the path of least resistance, and just kind of where I am is just kind of what happened, as opposed to it being a process that was prayerful and had lots of counsel and so on. Or I was just after the money. I just wanted to be secure. That's all I could think about, is just security. And so that was my main thing, was financial security. And I went to a job for that. Now I don't feel fulfilled in it. Mm-hmm. Should I be doing something else? Should I have had other considerations? Well, here's what I would say to that. Financial security is important. Mm-hmm. It's tough to eat if you don't have any money. And so that is a factor. But if you raise it above everything else, you can get very sideways in your priorities in terms of, am I really doing what God's called me to do?
Right.
And so it should be a factor, not the only factor. And that's true of almost any factor. The only real factor that's above everything else is, do I know this is what God's called me to do? And so, as you are working through, those of you who are listening are working through those issues. If you're in a position like that now, get those good counselors, get on your knees and be praying, asking God to answer you. He's not always going to answer you right away. I can tell you that because my own experience, there was actually a long period of time where God did not give me a clear answer. And I had to continue to bloom where I was planted, doing the things that God had me doing in that moment until he showed me the next thing. And so, and like I say, I may tell that story at some point. The other part that I wanted to talk about today, we don't have a lot of time to get into it, is sort of when you're in that place and as we're working, what does it look like to be a worker that is worth his wages or her wages? What does it look like to be a worker who is being Jesus Christ, is being Jesus' hands and feet? Whatever you're doing, whether that is you're a plumber, you're a construction worker, you're working, you're on an assembly line, you're in an office, you're a secretary, you're a doctor, you're whatever you are. What does it look like to be Jesus' servant in that scenario. And there's not a lot that we're going to be able to get into this time on that. But a couple things. If you're thinking about that, I mean, the simplest thing, I could give you 10 steps to being Jesus' hands and feet, and maybe we'll do that sometime. But let me just tell you the most important one. To be actually intentionally thinking about what does it look like when you get up in the morning. Are you praying for what you're about to do that day? Praying for your coworkers? Are you praying for opportunities to serve others in a way that honors Christ? Are you looking to be that? Because it starts with desiring that, having a desire to be Jesus to those who you're working with and to your boss, to your coworkers, to the people who are around you. Am I trying to be that? Am I trying to have the mind of Christ? And a lot of the other stuff comes kind of naturally if you have that mindset. And so I would say, because we really are running against time here, I would say, be as a worker who wants to be a worthy worker. First think about vocation. That's what we've talked about the most of this podcast. Think about vocation. What am I called to do? And this is not just in the work you do for money. This is also in the church, in your place in the body of Christ. What am I called to do here? And then as you do those things, don't let the opportunity pass by and just work because we have to work. Think about really using each day as an opportunity to push forward into the kingdom of God and to draw others into that. And what does that look like? Is it just a little more kindness? Is it a little thoughtfulness as you are a representative of Jesus Christ wherever you're working as a believer? Thinking very intentionally about the things that you do. Now, you've worked at Subway and you were a sandwich artist, so your lead of kind of media arts here, you were lead of sandwich arts.
Right. I wasn't the lead, but I was there.
But you were an artist, a sandwich artist.
Sandwich artist.
And I don't know if that was a minor at Boise Bible College or not, but
I wish.
Sandwich artistry. But even there, you had to think about, what did it look like to be a believer working in a place? I'm assuming there were unbelievers that worked at Subway with you.
Certainly.
What did it look like for you? What were some of the things that you thought about?
I don't know if I had any Christian coworkers, at least at the first Subway I worked at. It was actually, good to have that interaction with unbelievers. Partly because, if you've been to Bible college, which based on how small my Bible college was, not many of you have, you get in this little bubble of you're on campus with all these Christians, and not just Christians, but Christians who have decided that they're going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to go into ministry. That's a very specific subset of Christians. And so you have this very tight group of people with the same, desires and the same beliefs and everything like that, you kind of forget how the rest of the world operates. And so it was good to just be able to go do that, and interact with people outside of my bubble. I had a lot of students from Boise State University who worked with me, and they certainly had very different ideas than me. I had a transgender coworker who told me that they believed if they could, design a utopian community, everyone would have just basically every job would just get paid by the government what that job deserved. And so scientists would get the most money, of course. And then you could be a religious minister type person, but you wouldn't get paid for that. It didn't deserve any money. And and so it was kind of like, oh, okay, so you totally disagree.
I wonder what
with
lawyers
everything
would
I'm
get.
doing.
Now that I think about that, probably not much.
Yeah. And that I got to navigate that relationship with that person, to be able to work with them while we clearly have very different ideas about most things. And they were able to see that, no, I don't hate you because you very.
And they knew that you were in Bible college, and
Yeah. They were aware, and that's why, I don't think that they just were like walking through their society of this person gets this much, this person gets this much. I think they said, they were going to school to go into, I think astrophysics.
obviously science of some kind.
Some science, yeah.
The most money.
And so they said scientists who are advancing culture and society should get the most money, and religious.
And that right there is an interesting worldview statement, right?
Yes, yeah, it was very it's a totally different approach to
Zero
the world.
value in anything that is spiritual or suggestion that it's advancing anything.
Right.
And all the value in science. Yeah. So you're with these people, and what is the nature of how are you day by day? I mean, were you praying for them?
Yeah.
How are you day by day, interacting in a way, just showing them that a believer is not.
Yeah, I guess just not
Not backwards, not
just
rude,
just
not
being
mean-spirited.
being a real person and not being fragile. I think that there's this idea that if you swear around a Christian that you're going to hurt them or they're going to be offended, and if you're not a Christian, if you don't have any claims of faith, I'm not offended by anything you do, because why would I be offended by something that you did that you didn't have the same convictions that I have? And so I just got to show them that I was real. I was sincere, that I cared about them, even if they did things I disagreed with. And I think hopefully I was at least a good influence on that, a good picture of what a Christian could or should be like.
And what about in the work itself? Did you feel like working hard was important?
Yeah.
As a witness?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would look bad if I was just trying to get in and out of there as quickly as possible without doing. Because at Subway there were a lot of shortcuts you could take that would have varying levels of noticeability to your coworkers. Or maybe your coworkers wouldn't notice, but your managers would. There were a lot of, and it was very much, I was scheduled to work this long. But a lot of times I would be working later than I was scheduled for because of basically you have your list of tasks that you have to do, that you have to manage while also making sandwiches for people.
Right.
And so if it's a busy night, you don't get to that list until the dinner crowd goes away, which my last day did not happen. The dinner crowd never went away my last day. It was the worst last day. But so you can take shortcuts on that list to, either not do things entirely because they won't be noticed, or to do them partially because they won't be noticed. And so just having integrity and doing those things and trying to make your coworkers' jobs easier. That I'll talk about that last day of work. My last day of work at Subway, I was working with that transgender coworker, and I'll make this a quick story. And it was a Tuesday, so it wasn't like a hot day of the week for sandwiches or anything like that. And
what is the hot day of the week for sandwiches?
I don't know, but it wasn't Tuesday. Okay. I think Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays were actually like the upticks of people going to get sandwiches, and good weather. And it wasn't particularly good weather, I don't think. It would have been May, which I guess, or maybe April, which would have been somewhat better weather, but it was not like a particularly warm day.
So inexplicably you have a big dinner.
So it was just, we ran out of bread. So, the baking bread process is like a 3-hour process. So we had to make more bread. And so I think I was scheduled to get off at 9 that night. And I could have said, I think we're open till 11. I think we're on summer hours. So we're open till 11. So I could have said to my coworker, who was the closer, sorry, it's 9 o'clock. I got to go.
It's my last day.
Yeah, I know. I could have said that, or I think I stayed till 10 and helped them manage the nightmare that was that fateful Tuesday evening.
Right.
And so, I don't know if they recognized anything about that. I don't know if they thought anything of it, but I was being faithful to what I felt God had called me to do. I didn't see my work as just a way to earn a paycheck. I saw it as something that I was contributing, something that was building me up and building up those around me. And so I don't know if I always, I'm giving the right answer. I don't know if I always did that, but I at least somewhere knew that and generally think I was guided by that principle.
And it's an important principle. I mean, the fact is people do notice. And if you're going to say that you're a Christ follower, then honoring your coworkers and your boss, I mean, there is no job that's not a ministry.
Right.
And so it's not like pastors and worship leaders and whatever are the only ministers. Everyone is ministering. And so the question is, are you doing this unto the Lord? Or are you not? And so as you work your job, it is a vocation. If that's where God's got you right now, it's your calling. And if it's not your calling, then of course you need to walk through that process of figuring out whether it is. But if it is, and whether it is or it isn't, as you're working, you should be working as unto the Lord. People do notice. It does make a difference. And so I would keep that in mind as you go through your day. Don't think of your job as a hassle or something you have to do, but think of it as work that God has put in front of you, and look for those opportunities to minister as you do it. So we're going to close up. I'm going to pray, and then that'll be it for this one. Father, I thank you for work. We're sorry for our sins and that which has caused some of our work to be toil. And we look forward to the day when we'll work without the toil aspect in the kingdom, Lord, and when we're resurrected and we're remade and we're transformed into perfection, Lord. We look for that, and we want that so bad. But for now, Lord, we can still live in your Spirit, and we can do the things you've called us to do, Lord. We thank you for vocation and calling, and that our lives do have purpose, whether it's making sandwiches at Subway, whether it's leading worship here, whatever it is, wherever we are, wherever we work, that we would just do it as a ministry unto you. And I just pray that for those who are listening, for our church and for your church, Lord, worldwide, that those who love you would show that in the way that they work. And we ask that you would give us the strength and the ability to work hard, and that we would be a witness in that for you, whether we're allowed to talk about you at our job or not, that we would be talking about you through everything that we do, and that people would see you in us, Lord. We just pray for that, and we thank you for all that you've done for us. Be with those listening this week, those that have needs, physical, financial, emotional, Lord, that you would be there with our people, Lord, your people. In your name, amen.
Thanks for listening to the Acts Church podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got a lot out of it. Hope that you are considering what your vocation is, what your calling is, and that you were able to think through your own personal walk a little bit more as you listen to mine. Thanks for listening to so much of my story. Hopefully it was of some use to you. If you are not aware of what Acts Church is, we are a group of believers here in the Camas, Washington area near Portland, Oregon. You can check us out at www.axcamas.org. We have sermons up there. We have more podcasts up there. We have information about our ministries. We'd love it if you check it out. If you're in the area, we'd love it if you'd come visit us on a Sunday and consider making Acts Church your place of worship. We are just a body of believers who are interested in getting to know the character of Christ through his word and through our everyday lives more and more, and letting him shape our lives. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you again next time.